Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us again at Toy Fair University. Next up, we have Speed Round, Top Trends in Entertainment You Need to Know for 2026, with Kristen McLean from Circana. Kristen?
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be back here. I love the setup this year. It's really excellent, and thank you to the Toy Association for inviting us back. So I work in the cross-entertainment area of our business at Circana. And if I was to just talk to you today about all the things we do, we would be here all day just talking about that. So I wanted to start by just summarizing who we are, if you don't work with us already, the high level, and then we'll get right into a pretty quick take on the things that I think are going to be really important for the next 12 to 24 months. So we used to be NPD. We've been tracking the toy business now for 50 years. So we have been through many generations of tracking the toy business. Now we're really delighted to be part of this larger market research company where we are bringing together not only general merchandise, but also CPG into one really large and exciting company. We track 23 countries, and we track approximately 75% of the world's GDP. We do that in 26 industries on both our CPG and our GM, general merchandise side of our business, across 2,000 categories. We work with about 1,900 industry partners, and we track about 500,000 storefronts globally across the many areas of our business. We have a market measurement business, which is really exciting. We really help you not only measure the POS, but also then measure the impact of your marketing so that we can have a virtuous circle. And we are tracking about 30 million products in 96% of households. So we have a very large market measurement business. And for me, that's one of the most exciting things that we do, because when we were just doing POS and market measurement, as my friend Ian says, we would just give you all that information and say, see ya, good luck. Now we actually have the ability to really help you see the entire cycle of your business. And close to my heart, because I lead our licensing strategy, we track 3,000 entertainment licenses in our data in toys, books, video games, and media. And we are actively building a larger view of our licensing business now for all of the different categories that we cover. So you can expect some innovation from us in the next few years on that. Now, again, I could talk about that all day, but we're really here to talk about entertainment and the kinds of things you need to know just to be engineered for what I think is a really dynamic time in the industry. So we're going to start with some top-line data on the consumer mindset and what has been happening in the industry, some top-line trends that I think apply to everything we're going to talk about today, and then we're going to get into the 6 most important things I think that you need to be thinking about. So let's just start with where we are after 2025 here at the top of 2026. These are the 5 industries that we track in our entertainment practice, showing you the dollar growth inside the circles and the unit growth down below. So of all of our industries, US toys has had a great year last year. It was up 6% in dollars, up 3% in units. That is outperformance of all of our categories that we track, with the exception of video games. Books had a really good year, up 1%, and more importantly, I think for the people in this room, children's books were back to growth last year after about 5 years of slow declines. So, in a difficult and challenging environment, we often see children's categories and children's books rebound, and we're definitely seeing that right now. Video games, we had a great year thanks to the Switch, but it wasn't quite enough to offset unit sales in our physical business. So what that means is that even though we had basically the best hardware launch ever with the Switch 2, it wasn't enough to offset people moving from physical game consoles towards mobile and PC gaming. And that's especially true for younger gamers. So we are watching our mobile and PC market very carefully, and we do expect to have a lot to talk about this year, because of all these areas that I'm talking about, I think games has the most volatile outlook this year. A lot of what we're watching play out in the tech market around RAM, around dollar resources moving from, for instance, game studios towards AI programs. is really putting a lot of stress on the video game market, even though we have an amazing slate of video games scheduled for this year. So the creative part of the video game market is healthy, but there's a lot of volatility in the underlying business of games. So that makes our outlook a little bit uncertain. The juvenile market is our most challenged area of the market that we track in entertainment, down 5% in dollars and down 8% in units. There's a lot of demographic factors that are driving that decline. If you want to talk to us more about that, our juvenile expert is actually here with us, Steven. And then in streaming media, we actually work with third-party data on streaming. We do a lot of work within the behavioral part of streaming media. But when we look at our partner data, streaming media was only up about 1% last year after double-digit growth the year before, dollars up 6%. And what we're seeing there is really a maturing of the household market for streaming. Streaming took the lead over traditional linear television and cable for the first time last year, but we really are settling into a much more mature part of that market. And there again, we're going to see some volatility also because of people's concerns over their wallets. To characterize just the overarching psychology of the market right now, the vibey feel of the market, I think there are two really important things to be thinking about. The first is that everybody, and I would bet that even you here in this audience, are feeling the effects of the amount of rapid change that we're seeing happen culturally right now, right? Discussions about the impact of AI, discussions about the economic environment, discussions about tariffs and costs, where we run our businesses from, where we make our products, what's happening to our children, what's happening to our household wallet. All of that is out there for people right now, and it's a lot to cope with, and we're seeing some interesting consumer behavior related to that. And then just the general uncertainty of the marketplace. Whether or not people are going to be able to meet the needs of their families, whether or not we as business owners and in the industry are going to be able to make products at the right price point, in the right places to sell, and to keep our businesses healthy. So that is all kind of the umbrella under which everything I'm going to show you is operate. Okay, these next couple slides are coming from our macroeconomic retail analysis. So the first is just to give you a sense, and this I don't think is going to be a surprise to people in this room because this is something that the economic and financial community has been talking about, but we're seeing a really strong division between the upper and lower part of the market in terms of who is driving household spend and growth right now. So this slide has got the three areas of household income with the 50K and under down at the bottom in the pink, 50 to 100 in the middle in pink, the brighter pink, and then over 100,000 in yellow. And when they talk about the K-shaped economy, this is what they're talking about, right? A lot of our economic story in the US is being driven by higher income households. And the thing that concerns me more about that than this slide is the arrow on the end of each one of those lines. Even the upper income households, when we look at our data through November, is going down, right? So this is part of that uncertainty heading into 2026, right? If the bottom drops out or if something really radical happens to impact the household spending in the upper part of the household incomes, and let's be honest, 100,000 is like middle, I think, these days, right? I mean, it's not really what we used to think of as being the top. So really, we're really talking about upper middle income and above. Like there are some worrying signs that things are going down. So this is one of the things, like depending on what happens with this line this year, we could have a lot of different knock-on effects in the economy. The other thing is, and I just want to point out because this is not toys, this is everything. So if we showed you this by toys, it would look a little bit different because the 18 to 24 line on the bottom is more important, has a higher frequency higher frequency consumer base in our industry, but this is just everything. This is showing you that not only is it lower income households, but you're seeing on a unit basis, the 18 to 24-year-olds spend a lot less. This is where we're really seeing erosion in the consumer base in the overall economy, and it's the 35 to 44s that are doing the best. That's the family age, right? So, and when we break that apart and look at households with kids versus households without kids, households with kids are actually doing better in terms of their spending than households without kids. So kids continue to drive a certain amount of purchasing even in times of economic difficulty. Okay, if there's one slide in this entire deck that I think is really important, it's this one. These are the 8 interwoven trend themes that we're talking about for this year, and I think that they're going to be relevant for several years. And I think this is really a roadmap for your product and strategic decision making. So we're seeing that anything that facilitates experiences for consumers in real life, right, and connection, that's a big bet. Anything that delivers joy, happiness, that's a big bet. Countervailing there, though, is affordability and necessity, so that everybody, when they're looking at a purchase, is always thinking, okay, is it affordable for me wherever I sit in the household income range? Is it a necessity? Do I really need this thing? Is it the right thing right now for what I'm prioritizing? And then in terms of like the trends that are driving purchasing, we have some really interesting things that continue to be central. So creativity, we're seeing a very strong trend towards creativity right now, not just for children, but for adults. So that's coming out in lots of interesting ways, DIY, puzzling, and then right alongside that is still a very strong driver towards fanship. So when we look at some of our general merchandise categories like apparel, like one of the things that's driving apparel is fanship, right? Very, very strong. Collectability, this is something we've been tracking. This has been important to us for years now, but it's continuing to be a very, very strong driver. And then retail reinvention. We're really interested in what we're seeing happen with retail, particularly retail innovation that's coming from Asia towards the rest of the world, and we're going to talk about that down below. But if you're thinking about a product launch or a program and you look at this list and your program or product ticks more than 2 of these boxes, you're probably on the right track right now. Okay, so let's talk about the 6 things. We're going to start with the things that are more concrete, and we're going to move to the things that are more speculative. So this is actually a G12 slide, courtesy of Fred, our global toys analyst. This is the 4 things that have been driving growth in the greater G12 marketplace. So, and these will be familiar to you, right? Licenses up 15% across the G12. Collectibles up 32% across the G12. Ages 12 plus, up 16% across the G12, and occasions. So occasions is really interesting. This is a place where we're splitting between the US market and the EU. So in the US, we're seeing that micro occasions or micro holidays driving nearly 10% growth. But in the EU, it's the opposite. It's no occasion purchasing in the EU that's driving roughly the same amount. Micro occasions is not just like the smaller holidays. Micro occasions is anything that people want to celebrate. And when we look at micro occasions, it varies by industry what are the drivers, but it's a really important part of incremental growth. Here are the top gaining properties for US toys, right? And these are ranked from #1 in the upper left, Pokemon, #1 brand in the world right now. And then going down to number 10 on the lower right, One Piece. First thing to notice here is just that these are a really interesting group of properties coming from different parts of the industry, right? So there's some texture in here, there's some video game properties, there's a lot of trading card properties, collectibles in here. We got some movie properties, Lilo and Stitch, Jurassic World, and then we've got One Piece, which is a really notable crossover that we're seeing, like a pure license play coming into many areas of the business. So I do think, though, that the impact of collectible trading cards cannot be overstated right now in terms of the top of the market, right? If you look at a top list of item level toys, a lot of it is going to be individual item level trading cards. So that continues. Okay, so I could put up a slide here from micro occasions, and I could put up one from apparel, or I could put up one from one of our other areas of entertainment. I could put up one from EU toys, but I'm going to demonstrate this just with this slide, which is the book slide, interestingly. So what you're looking at here is a week-over-week view of the weeks where the book market over-indexed the rest of general merchandise. And anything that's in bright pink is an occasion where books tied to that occasion drove sales. So you can see, particularly around some of our smaller holidays and some summer holidays, those occasions really drove sales, and that's been one of the strongest areas of growth for books. But books had a really good year in the fourth quarter because books, dollar for dollar, are perceived as high value and a really good price point. So we did see books overall do better in Q4 than a lot of other areas of general merchandise. But if I was to show you apparel, you would see that Derby Week drove apparel. You would see that Spring Break Week drove apparel. You would see that that winter vacation drove apparel. So every industry has different micro occasions, and every market has different micro occasions, right? We might see that a toy in Australia does great for Chinese New Year, for instance. So this, I think, is really important because as we're trying to really claw any growth that we can, micro occasions, trigger moments of purchase are really important for trying to find that incremental growth. So I don't anticipate 2026 that the drivers are going to change much, right? The things that we've been talking about are really going to stay with us. 12+, licensing, fanship, collectability. So really it's about where can you find space in between to get your growth. And a lot of that has to do with making sure that you have the right product in the right place to drive those occasional purchases. Okay, so I could do a whole hour on this next slide. I'm just going to go through it quickly and call out some things that I've seen even here at the show. So one of my jobs is to look for content trends that sit across entertainment, so not just in toys. I'm looking at books as a very primary source of this information, but we also look at movies, games, apparel, Pinterest. We do a lot of different trend hunting. So these are the trends that I'm seeing across all of these categories. So horror and gothic, there's lots of great examples of that here. Of course, Five Nights at Freddy's, but there's a lot of other really interesting horror licenses that we're seeing here. And then in the romance and media categories, we're seeing gothic, which is the mashup of romance and horror. We also are seeing, by the way, uptick in vintage horror games, which I find really interesting. Early 90s horror games, people are returning to those games. Sci-fi and dystopian. We're seeing this is an emerging trend. I think it's replacing people's interest in romance in a weird way. So sci-fi, dystopia, we're seeing it in fiction, we're seeing it in video games, we're seeing it in some really interesting licenses that are emerging. I think that this is a darker reaction to the anxiety and uncertainty of the moment. I also think it's a little bit of a reaction to all of the AI, our discomfort or comfort or confusion over technology right now. This is the flip side. This is the lighter side, right? This is DI and crafting, and this we are seeing, again, through every age group. So we're seeing, I saw the Woobles downstairs. They've added some really interesting stuff for the earlier part of their market, but we're seeing DIY craft books for adults. We're seeing lots of interesting art and craft offerings here. And we're seeing it in all ages toys, all ages books, 3D puzzles, right? Things that book nooks, wearables, so building your own wearable, building your own keychains, building your own charm bracelets, and then stationery. A lot of really interesting, we think stationery is a trend to watch for the next couple of cycles. Longevity and focus. So this is a broader category that we're seeing across many areas of GM. So we are seeing books about longevity pop. They have for the last couple years, but we're seeing puzzles, things that are for brain health. We're seeing wearable tech around being able to track your health. We're seeing beauty and supplements for longevity. I think that Melissa Bernstein's new project downstairs, Lifelines, right, coming off Melissa and Doug, is in this space also. Really interesting. And then newness and innovation. One of the things that we saw at Nuremberg and that we're continuing to see is that we really are starting to see some really interesting innovation in categories that you might not expect it, like puzzles, for instance. So I do think that after years of doing a lot of line extensions, nostalgia, I'm going to talk about that in a second, that there are new properties, new, like this music. Has you guys seen this music toy that's over here? That's like a MIDI music toy. It's fantastic. Like, we are seeing new and interesting things break through. And I'm really convinced that over the next couple of cycles, we really have to invest in innovation, because I think nostalgia is not going to work, and I'll talk about that next. So we're seeing two types of escapism, stuff that is moving towards the softer, comforting, kawaii, cozy, and that's going to continue this year. And then the other side is dark, edgy, ironic, sharp, mysterious, cryptozoology, like all that stuff. I do think that when you're looking for fresh fresh sort of ways of ideating these themes, I'm looking for blends. So I mentioned Gothic as horror and romance. I think that there's a lot of psychological sci-fi out there right now that's going to be hitting, so that's horror and sci-fi. So really looking for ways to blend these. Even cute kawaii and horror, we're seeing plenty of that. So just thinking about interesting ways to bring these together. Okay, let's talk about nostalgia. This may be controversial. It's my job up here to bring you the controversial takes sometimes. I actually think that we hadn't, and don't freak out if you've got a nostalgia product rolling out right now. I'm not talking about right this second. I think over the next 2 years, nostalgia really needs to move off stage. I'm not talking about legitimate fan programs. I'm not talking about collectability. I'm just talking about slavish nostalgia, like going into the vault and bringing up that, 1990s TV show that wasn't necessarily on the top of the list, but we're going to try to bring it back because we own the IP. I really think that we've got a bit of a challenge coming around nostalgia. How many of you guys saw this ad, the Super Bowl for Dunkin' Donuts, that was I would say not very successful? How many of you those of you saw it, how many of you found it a little bit creepy? Raise your hand. Okay. So there's been a lot of backlash against this ad in particular, but I would argue that one of the challenges in the AI environment right now is that AI is awesome at pulling on nostalgia, but it's not very successful sometimes in delivering it in the right way. In its early days, I actually think that we're going to see AI muddy nostalgia in such a way that it's really, I think at a time consumers are already ready to kind of move away from it, and we're going to see more bad examples. That's just going to make people less excited for and less connected to particular nostalgia plays. I also think we've been kind of resting on our laurels a little bit over the last 5 years, and that we can innovate better than we have been, and I want to encourage everyone to do that because I think consumers are really ready for it. So, we're getting a lot of questions about AI in toys. This is my personal take on it. We are happy to have the conversation. We're developing a point of view on it, and we will talk to you about your business in particular if you want to talk about it. But this is just my public take, right? I think licensing is still a huge driver, but fans have to lead. You have to put fans in the center. You have to pick IP that are really based in actual consumer desire, because it's a very crowded marketplace, and people their attention is really distracted. I don't think nostalgia is something we should be pursuing like in the next 24 months. I think we should move away from it and really work on delivering the same feelings, the warm feelings, the happy feelings, the connected feelings, but in a way that feels fresh. I think that we have to test licensed fanship very carefully. I've seen a lot of examples of people who are like, this is the next best license, and put it out in a toy, but without having a really good and uniform way of measuring what the potential market is, what the demographics are, and not everything is going to be successful. So if you really want to engineer yourself for success, you need to do a little bit of brand research. And we do that if you want to work with us. Okay, so play patterns are changing. I am not saying play is going away, and I'm not even saying that these are 100% binary at all, but I just want to acknowledge that we are seeing some changes, right? So we're seeing some shift from play to display, right? And we are also seeing companies innovate to address that. So a really good innovation that we've seen that just rolled out is the Lego Smart Brick. This is an innovation that I think is really an opportunity to try to get kids back into the play side of play display. Really smart and interesting. In the book space, we're seeing a shift from read to do. So a lot of growth in activity books, in education books and a kind of decline for fiction, particularly middle grade, and that's troubling in the publishing market. There's a lot of conversation going on about what to do about that, but there's also opportunities to innovate, and we are seeing some interesting new types of activity books come out, some new sticker books, and we are seeing some reading programs that are going to come from publishers. So it's a big topic of discussion in the publishing market. And the third is the shift from pretend, what I call pretend, to practice. Again, this is not, there are plenty of kids that are doing pretend play, but we're also have done a lot of talking over the last couple of years about what's happening with girls and what are they doing instead of playing. And a lot of them are going to fashion, to beauty. We've heard talk about the Sephora kids. And we are seeing some really interesting innovation around that opportunity. So I'm really a big fan of the MGA Mini Glam project that's rolling out at Target right now. But in talking to Fred about it, we think there's also an opportunity in the other side in the pretend play around things like play sets, right? Moving back towards really compelling and interesting play sets instead of just standalone action figures might be something to discuss. So we think there are opportunities in both sides of these shifts, but we want to encourage you to be thoughtful about it and to really think about the play patterns and where your opportunities map onto these shifts in behavior. So, like I said, there are product opportunities to support new play patterns or emerging play patterns, and there's definitely opportunities to reignite old play patterns. And this is just tying into my encouragement to innovate. I really think that we need to invest in some innovation in order to be able to really take advantage of these shifts. Okay, anybody who walks around this hall is going to see the influence of Asian content. We've been in 3 or 4 years worth of pretty strong cycles over Asian originated and Asian-inspired content, K-pop Demon Hunters being peak right now. But I just want to flag for you something that we're going to be talking about a lot to our clients is that I actually think that the story is not about the content. I think there's another story behind it that we really need to talk about and really I want you to be aware of, which is that I think that the innovation in retail and the innovation in logistics that's coming is really potentially disruptive and impactful. So I'm really, really interested in the Robo Shop story from Pop Mart. Everybody knows about Pop Mart's success with Labubu. We're all chasing it. But I actually think the Robo Shop, the way they're using Robo Shops is really important. So they are taking those Robo Shop kiosks and they are dropping them into markets where they want to see whether or not they can put a flagship. So they're using Robo Shops not only for brand and marketing purposes, but they're actually harvesting information on the market strength of a particular location before they put in a flagship store. They're doing it all over the world. They're doing it not just in retailers, they're doing it in malls, and they're running about 2,500 of them right now, but they have a very aggressive expansion strategy. So I think that's very powerful if you talk about global, vertically integrated retail expansion, right? Super smart. We already know about Miniso, 8,100 stores globally right now. And then, in case you weren't aware, Shein opened their first store in Paris. Like, of all the places for them to think about opening their first store physically, they're opening in Paris, which of course caused a lot of strong feelings among Parisians. The store opening was a success, but it has, they're facing some headwinds on their expansion plans in Paris. But again, this is a signal of their ambition. I think we need to watch it. And then on logistics, if you didn't hear, JD.com, is it Joy.com? Joyboy.com is their consumer-facing brand. But they're doing just-in-time logistics in the EU. They're building warehouses all over the EU to be able to deliver the way Amazon does in the United States, right? That's going to be very powerful for them. So I just want to flag this for people. We're going to keep talking about it and building some more analysis around it, but I do think 5 years from now when we have this conversation, there's going to be a lot to talk about in terms of the penetration of these experiments, innovations, growth, whatever you want to call it, into our global marketplaces. And I think we have to think about what that means for our individual businesses. The other Asian innovation, which was recently became an American innovation here in the States, is what's been happening with TikTok Shop, right? $6.5 billion, $230 million units, right, in Q4, and just over 405,000 shops. And what's really interesting, it isn't showing on this slide, but I can tell you, is when we look at the top retailers that are driving this, most of them are shops you have never heard of. These are additive to our mainstream retail market. And I think that that is really interesting. So how many people have bought something off TikTok Shop in the last year? Okay, relatively small number of hands here. Interesting. I think that there's a few things about it. The fact that it is turning out to be incremental, the fact that it is turning out to be an incubator for new brands, right? So my kid, 18-year-old, bought a comfort sweatshirt, which is basically a weighted blanket in a sweatshirt form. It's all that they do, bought it off TikTok Shop. Super impulse driven, right? Very efficient. So I do think that this is something that we're going to be watching, and we have just started tracking this. So if you are a client of ours and you want to hear about that, or if you want to find out more about it and you're not a client, please let us know. We're happy to talk about it. So I just encourage you to broaden your lens from just thinking about the Asian trend in content, which is getting kind of saturated, and really pivot towards thinking about Asian innovation in retail and logistics and what the possible impacts are going to be here in the States, but also more broadly in the global market. Finally, so this I think is the most speculative thing I'm going to talk about today, but I also think it is has the most potential to disrupt our business in the next 5 years. And that is that families are rethinking their relationship with tech. How many of you guys are parents of children under the age of 18 in this room? Raise your hand. Okay. Tell me that raise your hand if you are not concerned about your child's use of tech or the impact of tech on your child. Okay. So I think that we're reaching this really important inflection point right now that there's many factors happening culturally here, but I think that we're about to see a fundamental shift that is going to be really important for our industries. So parents are super concerned over mental health, educational performance, social and emotional growth of their kids, screen addiction, and privacy. And I would argue they're having those concerns about themselves also, right? And that is resulting in some pretty strong reactions that I think are going to affect everything from the way we market to our ability to track trends, to maybe even a move away from digital and back to analog behavior in some of our play patterns. It's going to be really interesting. We have social media bans happening now in several countries. We have phone-free school districts happening here in the United States. Some of our largest districts are going phone-free. We just this week started several lawsuits over the addictiveness of social media for teens that are going to be probably impactful in regulation. And just generally, there is a bit of anger against big tech right now that is broader than just social media and our children, but I think it's going to kind of create velocity around these types of movements. I could give you 12 different stats over children's behavior, performance rather. This happens to be a nice clean one about kids reading. This is the decline in reading scores for kids from 2019 to 2022. I have another beautiful slide that shows reading for pleasure up until 2008 when the smartphone arrived, and then reading for pleasure dropping off a cliff. But there's definitely a lot of data that backs up the fact that I can't say it's causal, but I can definitely say that there's corollary between when the smartphone arrived and some of these performance metrics, and it's definitely a K-shaped performance also. Higher income households, they've managed to maintain their scores, but middle and lower income households are really underperforming, and that's going to be something that we're going to hear talked about. So I've had several conversations with some of our biggest clients over AI. I think that it is a little early, and I would encourage you to be super cautious. We're in this weird bind right now because especially if we're a publicly traded company, we need to be engaging in and participating in best practices for our businesses, but at the same time, consumer attitudes towards AI are not good. This is the Pew in September asking a nationally representative sample of people how they felt about AI, and it's not great. They think that it's going to actually drag us down in a whole bunch of really important societal ways. So I also think that AI is not dependable technology enough yet to be able to put in front of children. So for that reason, I would really encourage you to think about the reputational risk if something goes wrong with AI in a product that you're bringing to market, if you're trying to put it into a toy for kids. And I'm not saying don't use tech-enabled toys. I'm going to give you a couple examples of great tech-enabled toys. I'm just cautioning you against AI right now. This is dovetailing with another trend that I'm calling more broadly attentional fitness, right? Many of you in this room probably are struggling with this for yourself, right? We've got lots of data showing that the adults in the room are struggling with their own attention. So talking about wanting to cut back on their phone usage, that they are using products like Brick, which if you haven't seen it, Brick is something that you touch your phone to and it puts your phone into focus mode, and then you walk away from it, and it leaves it in focus mode until you touch it again. So we're seeing tech come along, we're seeing apps like Focus Friend from John Green be the #1 app store, #1 app in the country. It's a focus app. So, and then younger consumers are even more interested in this. So Gen Z in particular are very, very aware of this and are leading the way, I think, in wanting to try to control this. So we're doing a lot of talk about what does the return to analog look like for people who are working on their attention fitness. And I think that's also an opportunity for us, depending on what part of the business we're in. But we're all struggling with it, so I just encourage you to take a thoughtful approach when you're talking about tech and AI and the toy business. So whatever you do, I think the quality play pattern has to be at the center of the conversation. Even if you are using best-in-class tech in your toys, you have to communicate about the play pattern, and you have to really make that case to parents, right? Should be emphasizing value, not the tech. And again, the reputational risk around AI right now, it's just not dependable enough or safe enough to put in a child-facing application. In my opinion, there's a lot of great ways to implement tech that don't require you to use AI. And here are 2 examples right now in the market that I think are doing a great job with this. I want to compliment them. And then also VTech has another fantastic new release that is doing a great job of making tech-enabled experiences for kids. So I think all of 3 of these toys, that the focus is on play, it's on fun, it's on core play patterns, it's on togetherness, it's on connectivity, connection. So that's what I think, as we continue to navigate this uncertainty, that's what I think we need to be focusing on. So if we were just to talk about 4 top-line takeaways here, I do think adults and fan expansions should still be your top strategic consideration. I just think that 12+ market is going to continue to be really, really strong driver, particularly for the top of the household incomes, but not just. You have to be thinking about that at every level, right? So thinking about multiple price points, thinking about your assortment, thinking about the packaging and everything for meeting the different needs of different clients and different channels. I do think emerging demographics and micro occasions, depending on where you're sitting, is one of the ways to find incremental growth. But also customer retention right now is really important. Keep those customers with you, because the information environment and the things on offer, there's so much competition for attention right now. There's so much concern that people are having that engaging your customers and creating great experiences for them to keep them with you is really important. So engaging with fan communities, for instance. We really believe that newness is going to become critical to win in the next 12 to 24 months, right? We've got some great examples out here. I really think that we need more investment in innovation, smart innovation, right? Innovation that has a point, that has a target customer that you've researched, and that makes sense with where people are at in their heads right now. Again, nostalgia. I think AI is going to really muddy nostalgia. So I think innovation And warm feelings without slavish nostalgia is going to be important. And then this just goes without saying, I've said it already, uncertainty. Uncertainty is going to be the state of being for the next, I would say, several years. So we as a data company, I mean, that's what we do, but I'm not saying this just because it's what we do. I really think that more than ever, because of the incrementality, because of the amount of competition, because of the uncertainty, it's super important to have good data to back up your strategic decision making. Right? We do a lot of things. So this is a few of them. If you're interested in finding out more about what we do, we are happy to talk to you. My team is actually here. And if you would like a copy of the presentation or you want to talk to us about your business, whether or not you're a client or not, come see us over here. And I thank you very much and wish you guys a good rest of the show.